This is a production of Cornell University.
Welcome to the annual Freund Prize Alumni Reading Series, a series founded in 2011 along with the Freund Prize in Creative Writing. The readings and prizes were established in order to honor and support Cornell alumni who recently have published a first book. Each Freund Prize comes with a cash stipend of $5,000. The word Freund in German means friend. Friend happens to be the euphemism that the university uses to identify people who might be persuaded to give money to the university. As in today, the dean is having lunch with two of arts and sciences' closest friends. Philip Freund, though, did not have to be taken to lunch. He was a true friend who approached the English department himself with a desire to endow programs that would benefit writers. He was a fiction writer also, as well as a historian of theater and a professor. During his lifetime, among the many things he did, he published 34 books, including works of fiction and a 3-volume history of the theater. His generosity to English allows the department to fund the Freund lectureships in creative writing, something that we would not be able to fund without the endowment. So in addition to the prizes, he's funded lectureships. Today we welcome back 3 MFA alumni and 1 undergraduate alumna, each of them already distinguished in the fields of fiction or poetry, although they each have published only 1 book. The first Freund reader is Chung, who got an MFA in 2006, graduated from the University of Chicago in 2001 with honors. She had a minor in economics and a major in mathematics. In 2006, after she graduated from Cornell with an MFA in fiction, she remained at Cornell teaching writing in the English department for 2 years before she began a series of residencies and teaching positions prior to publishing her first novel, Forgotten Country. That's from 2012. When she was teaching at Cornell, she became so well known among her colleagues as a brilliant classroom teacher and course designer that for a number of years after she left Cornell, her syllabi and assignments were still being appropriated by other teachers. I used to go visit classrooms you have to observe people teach. I visited them when they happened to be teaching from her syllabi, and I'd say, where did you get this wonderful idea? And they'd say, oh, it's from somebody named Kathy something that used to be here. Her fiction is always structurally complex, ranging across cultures, continents, decades, and yet is so gracefully, seductively written that you hardly notice that you are reading it. It just reads easily. You don't notice the complexity of the project. Among the number of places where she has been in residence as a writer are the MacDowell Colony and Yaddo. Among her distinctions are National Endowment for the Arts Individual Fellowship Award. Among the places she has taught, in addition to Cornell, are the University of Leipzig in Leipzig, Germany, and Adelphi University in New York. Perhaps her most surprising and distinguished award is a residency at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton. That's the place that sheltered Einstein. Einstein and Chung. They will be known for those 2 people for millennium. While there, she worked on her second novel, The 10th Muse, which will be published by Echo Press in June 2019. Please join me in welcoming Chung.
That will be the only time that my name is used with Einstein, so I'll just enjoy it. Thank you, Stephanie, for that lovely introduction, and to the MFA program and faculty for bringing me back here, and for always supporting me and just being endlessly good to me and sort of raising me since I was a baby writer. It's such a pleasure to be reading with everyone, and I will be reading from my new novel, which is narrated by a mathematician in her 70s who's approaching the end of her career, and she thinks that she stumbled upon what could be her greatest discovery. So I'll read part of the first chapter, and then I'll skip ahead and read from a section containing a math problem. And to keep things interesting and hopefully ensure that you don't fall asleep for that part, I will add the incentive that I will buy the first person who approaches me with a solution a copy of one of those books of your choice, of one of my fellow readers. Okay, so this is chapter 1. There is nothing as intriguing as a locked door, which is why in 1900, when David Hilbert presented the first of his 23 unsolved mathematical problems in his address to the Second International Congress of Mathematicians in Paris, he changed the course of scientific inquiry and thereby the course of the world. 23 locked doors to beguile the foremost minds of his time. 23 locked doors to stand in front of and circle throughout the century. To this day, 12 of these problems remain unsolved. In my youth, I dreamed of scaling the heights myself and drawing forth a solution as gleaming and perfect as Excalibur. One day, I told myself, I would open one of Hilbert's fabled doors, join the honors class of mathematicians who have conquered one of those 23 problems and whose names will be known throughout time. I've lived long enough to know now that no matter what your contributions, one falls in and out of favor, even Hilbert, even Einstein. For now, I am in the amusing, slightly awkward position of finding that while my reputation is on the rise, my actual presence, my opinion, my thoughts are less relevant than ever. Certainly, no one expects me to be on the cusp of a new discovery. But here's a secret. I've recently found a key to a door that has long been hidden, a mystery I feel I was born to unravel. And not just any mystery, but a door that could lead to the solution of the 8th and most famous of Hilbert's remaining problems, the Riemann hypothesis, which predicts a meaningful pattern hidden deep within the seemingly chaotic distribution of prime numbers. I've told no one yet because I know that until I have all the evidence in order, I'll be laughed at, the same as if I suddenly announced I'd fallen in love. At my age, all passions look foolish to outside eyes. If I were a man, it'd be different. I don't mean that as an admission of envy, but as a statement of fact. Because who has time for envy anymore? The days speed by so quickly, gaining momentum with each passing month. The fear that I'll die before I get to the end fuels my work, and I wake with an urgency that feels like an echo from youth, a reflection of the desperation I felt in my early years when I feared I'd miss my chance. Perhaps this is why I dream more and more of people from my grad school days, my old competitors and colleagues, my professors, and especially Peter. In my dreams, everyone is dying. They lie down one by one in perfectly ordered graves that proceed along a straight line, head to toe, forming a road that points at the horizon. I ask them where this road leads, and each time I ask my question, they smile and reach up to close their own coffins, shut their eyes, and die. Goodbye and good riddance, I'd say, if the dream ended there, but then I notice that the closed coffins have numbers and symbols on them, and the string of them form an equation strangely familiar to me, one that I know the solution to. So I walk up and down trying to figure it out, whether I should be walking in the direction of the heads or the toes, whether what I need to find is the beginning or the end, until I realize that no matter what, in the line of infinite coffins that stretches out to the ends of the earth, one coffin is missing, and it is mine. And then I know that the missing piece of the formula, the key, is my death, and that I will lose the answer in completing it, and I wake up furious and cursing and filled with a terrible grief. All my life, I've been told to let go as gracefully as possible. What's worse, after all, than a hungry woman, greedy for all that isn't meant to be hers? Still, I resist. In the end, we relinquish everything. I think I'll hold on while I can. My recent discovery is rooted in the work and time of a mathematician named Emmy Noether and those who orbited around her. It was during her time that we began to anticipate how complex things might get without yet being entrenched in that complexity, like standing on the brink of chaos. and what company she stood with on that very brink. It was the time of Bohr, of Heisenberg, Wittgenstein, Gödel, Einstein, and Turing. Quantum mechanics was being born, as was atomic theory, the computer, the uncertainty principle, the black hole, and the nuclear bomb. It was an exciting time, but everything was in disarray. There was the rubble of creation, the rubble of destruction. We were at the heights from which we imagined we could see everything, not just what we knew, but all the possibilities as well, a universal theory that explained everything, and its inverse, the collapse of science itself. We were on the brink of understanding God or killing him forever, we didn't know which. Exhilaration and dread came together, and the knowledge that no great discovery can come without bringing an equivalent terror. It was around that time that Schilling and Meisenbach exploded onto the scene with a brand new theorem that seemed to sketch a possible opening to the Riemann hypothesis, a hypothesis some mathematicians say is too beautiful not to be true, and others say would be akin to proving the existence of God. Schilling and Meisenbach's theorem captured the attention of every major mathematician of the time and was labeled a triumph for the side of order and beauty, an attempt to knit together the chaos. And even after their proof was reviewed and tested, after a public cheer went up, even after Einstein himself, I've been saying Einstein a lot, even after Einstein himself made it known that he would like to shake their hands, neither Schilling nor Meisenbach stepped forward. It eventually became known that Meisenbach had been a student of Noether's at the University of Göttingen before she was exiled by the Nazis, and his partner Schilling had disappeared shortly before publication of their paper. Meisenbach refused to appear for any of the honors offered to him, and he never spoke of the man who'd co-authored what would be his greatest contribution to the field. And so Schilling and Meisenbach were forgotten, lost to the turmoil of their times. It would be shocking how quickly this happened, given their contribution, but they were working during one of the most exciting times for science and also the most dangerous. The world order was changing on every level. To quote Newton, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction, and the earnest idealism that had briefly ignited the hearts of students all over the continent of Europe in the aftermath of the First World War had been overtaken by fury and nationalism. The sky was opening, the gods had fallen. Fascism had gained its foothold. Mussolini was leader in Italy. Hitler was on the rise in Germany. The mood of the times was turning murderous. And so the war came, and bombs were dropped, and schools were closed, and the Jews and homosexuals, the dissidents and handicapped, were led away as their neighbors watched on, and so many were killed. Göttingen, that haven, that bastion of mathematics and science, was overtaken by Nazis. Noether was the first mathematician to lose her job, and then Courant was gone, Klein was gone. Everyone who could escape to England or America escaped. When asked what would happen to the famed mathematics department, now gutted, Hilbert responded, "What mathematics? There is no mathematics in Göttingen anymore." And such was the loss in the realm of mathematics, and such was the loss in the world, that no one noticed too much when both Schilling and Meisenbach were forgotten. Until me. I entered their stories decades after they were lost to anonymity, their beautiful theorem referenced and used, but old enough that no one asked anymore what had happened to its authors. No one questioned where they'd gone. But now I've discovered the truth of what happened between them and why they never published again. And I believe I found how their work may open a door to the heart of the Riemann hypothesis, where if I'm right, I could be the first to go. Okay, so now I'm going to skip ahead several chapters and read you the section with the math problem, which actually I'm going to begin with, so pay attention if you can solve it. Say there's a girl and a boy, and they're madly in love with each other, but they live on opposite sides of a lake that neither of them can cross. The boy wants to marry the girl and buys a ring to propose. There's a ferryman who goes back and forth on the lake. In his boat, he carries a box on which you can put any lock. If you put something in the box, he'll take it across to the other side. But unless the box is locked, he'll steal whatever you give him before he reaches the shore. Either way, he can go back and forth across the lake as often as you ask him to. The boy has one lock and the key to his lock, and the girl has another lock and the key to her lock. How does the boy get her the ring? I solved this problem for extra credit on my final exam in Peter Hall's class, my first semester of graduate school. He called me into his office after the exam and said I had received the highest score in the class and congratulated me. I looked at the equations on the chalkboards behind him and then down at his gleaming wood desk. I felt tongue-tied and inexplicably shy. You should know that the extra credit problem you solved is one of the foundational problems of modern cryptography, he said, and you were the only one to solve it. He reached across his desk and shook my hand. Congratulations, I've got my eye on you. I blushed. You have to understand, he was Peter Hall, the most famous mathematician on the faculty, maybe in America, appealing in that rumpled scientist way, and he had his eye on me. He'd written a problem that in our class only I had solved, and he'd couched it in a language of love, then revealed it to belong to the domain of cryptography. I was in over my head before we began. The problem I'd solved, that I felt sure he'd written for me, had drawn me in as only a mathematical problem could. Bounded, defined, it was a puzzle to break your head over until a solution appeared, everything leading up to it a struggle, but the answer itself effortless as a drawn breath. Let's take another look at the problem, the boy and the girl across the lake. He can get her the ring if you find the solution. No need to rush. This isn't a timed exam, and in the story, the girl and boy never age. Nothing will happen to them until you've figured it out. No one will fall in love with anyone else. No war will break out to take anyone away. No one will fall sick or die. So take your time. Later, when we come back to them, they'll still be there, the shining lake and the old ferryman between them, waiting for us to bring them together. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Robert Morgan. I had a dream last night, a terrible dream. It seemed I was supposed to introduce two poets, and I had written an introduction, but I couldn't find it. So I was looking in drawers, I was looking in my office, I was looking in the living room, and then I woke up and realized I did know where it was. Ezra Dan Feldman, MFA, 08, PhD in 17, has won the Patricia Bibby First Book Award for Habitat of Stones. He is widely published in magazines such as the Los Angeles Review and Crazy Horse. He teaches English and science and technology studies at Williams College. Ezra writes a poetry of surprise, spare lyricism, and implicit allegory, of oblique narratives and inverted fables. Many of the poems of Habitat of Stones read like voiceovers for imagined films. The vivid, unexpected details, the sly rhymes and paradoxes give us glimpses of a character called the Arrogant Man, with humor, wordplay, robust yet delicate gestures, leading us through a sexual and semiotic jungle. Stories and arguments we may not completely understand seem to end just right, though pointing to further complications. This is a poetry of fragmented confessions, broken mirrors, complex love, and unresolvable questions. Please welcome Ezra Feldman.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. My thanks, along with Kathy's, to the Creative Writing Program for bringing us back. It is marvelous always to be back in Ithaca. And a special thank you to Lyrae Van Cleef-Stefanen, who advised me through the beginnings of this book, and a note of memory also for Phyllis Janowitz, who is no longer with us, but who was also with me on this project. Stephanie mentioned one of the euphemistic uses of the word friend. I was thinking of another, which is that a friend is often code also for one's lover whom one cannot acknowledge, particularly if that is a lover of the same sex. There may be friends in these poems. Sonnet for More Than Knowing We Were There. Its sex was never clear, however handled. Full exposure revealed no realm inside, but he and I loved its flecked surface, warmed in our armpits, between our legs, or cooled in cool water and darkening and drinking liquid in. Sometimes the stone in my mouth so heavy it tired my tongue, I saw him jealously knowing the thing was fucking me in its hard, round way. Besides color and temperature, intangibles emanated. We both felt it, third to our occasional embrace, slower but fuller than us, taking new form as it vanished glacially in our ministry. And you, who want to know its composition, to exploit its name as agate or granite, gain nothing. We swore together, we grayed out the touches that would tell you how and who we were, sure of never igniting whatever was near. These first few poems I'm reading are the first 5 in this book, so the idea is teaser, and then you have to get the rest of it. Reverse theology. Dear body, dear brute, bring me close to the crumpled bus on the ice. It is you who make me. Shaken cap to shoes, you know your bruise. Shy of your woes, I beat your flesh and splinter bone. I knot myself into material to make myself grown your grown. Body, baby, sweet, dank cloak, I rendered you. I rend you just putting you on. The arrogant man leaves a note. A meditation on half rhymes, delivering news. Another, lover, and how those two talked to each other, scabrous, voluptuous. His mouth full, he likes peaches. He rolls dog-like in ditches, the note won't say, though it might. It could have been always together. It could, the note noted. But it is ice cream, roasted pumpkin seeds. It is half smile, is the salty sea. Apology. And for this poem, as for reverse theology, if you have a personal image of the Old Testament God, this would be a great time to conjure that for yourself. And if you don't, you can have this. Apology. It was an accident when I flamed your face. Since the day I took my shoes off, I've been inhibited, had the holy fold in my brain, some timorous worm. You know the smell of hellbush hasn't left me. My still tongue tastes coals. Quail queen, lady of hosts, plague purveyor, master of what's ill and of famine and drought. The waters depart me like locust swarms under your sway. Holy, 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 till my bony fingers inflame. Everything, I touch it, it blisters and curls. The arrogant man. He has taken, excuse me, I'm going to do that over again. The arrogant man. He has mistaken a bathtub for a grave for a pothole. He has run a rabbit to earth for its chattering. In the kitchen, he's scalded his hands on a glass of ice water. Where he lives, cold means cold. He has taken your bare breast for an advertisement, your wall of books for a fortress, taken cats for snoops, dogs for wild meat. He's thrown you to the sidewalk to save you from a hail of butterflies. In a laundromat, he asked once why everyone kept on feeding the animals. He's taken the world for a machine, a baby for a doll, a gun for a candy bar, which he offered to everyone. He once mistook a hammer for his own hand. Once he made love to a wall. He burned everything in your dressing room to clear the jungle. He grew a forest of candles and cried when it succumbed to wildfire. He wanted to restore the natural habitat of stones. So now I'm shifting ahead a little bit. I'm picking out 4 poems in this book that are all called Situation, or that are called Situation with a few words after it, maybe. We're all in a situation. I don't have an idea about how to get out of it, but these poems are, at least the first one, for me, very reminiscent of Ithaca, and so I wanted to read them on the occasion of being back here. Situation, in which for a prelude the air tears down Green Street, in which clouds slide in and thicken like a marble cake, in which city hall's flags insist they have something to say, in which every particle of whatever winter left solid goes live wire in electric air, in which fire engines sail past us in thunderous red rectangles, outrunning their own sirens on the gale, in which, and this begins it, an enormous bolt locks down the firmament, turns loose another engine, and the rain, yes, teeming, and what follows that, the world in shelter while you play. A fib, you live without me in the picnic sky. Situation. A swamp tree stands in for me, weak need. You come with your calipers and a poem not bigger than my latest bud. You know, I know what happens when water rises. No one remembers how I towered, how my thick roots madded an arrogant man, enticed him first to take measure. A swamp tree stands for me. With your calipers, you become my enemy. Take your cut of me. Waterlogged in the leg, what was hardwood bends into your word. Situation, in which his bushy hair eclipses your face like a cumulonimbus, in which I persist in reminiscing, in which, like rain coming, he kisses you and you soak it up, in which he promised you a warm room in his castle, a home in the labyrinth you didn't hear, in which later, quite by accident, you go there, you stir the banked coals, in which I await you with my umbrella at the city walls, in which the walls won't tell me why you are late, in which my umbrella keeps the rain from coming, in which its spokes are ours, its springs are bear traps, its ribs hold up a cathedral bursting with soul. Situation, in which the arrogant man has left me, gone off into the country, and me with my own thoughts, in which, a Friday afternoon, I window hope to spy a passionate flicker in the summer noise, a day a movie won't do, in which I tie myself to the bedposts to help myself wait, in which a lone man folds his linens in a tall building. At night, his cloth still flashes as he shakes it, pantomime lightning, in which you arrive late in your stately glory and chide me. He's not coming home early. You make yourself at home. In which you hang yourself in the window. I can't touch you. Glass and my invention intertwine. I tell myself I am your secret scribe. You tell me what is and isn't as it seems, the missing man and what he puts me in mind of. Gaggle of jungles, school of ropes, satellites assembling in a flock. So that's it from Habitat of Stones. I'm going to read 4 poems from my current manuscript, which is called On What Sun? And in the interest of making my oblique narratives possibly less oblique, I should say that this new book has a cast of characters, 2 of whom you will very briefly meet. One of them is Zork, an ex-overseer of renovated worlds. That's pretty oblique. And the other of whom is Arbuthnot, an administrative prophet, unenvied mediator between his worldmates and Zork. photogravure with an epigraph from Hamlet. If it be not now, yet it will come. The readiness is all. In the space alien poetry to come, Arbuthnot meets Zork. Ask nothing of these two ciphers, whose meeting is a metaphor for distance your printing won't keep. What will they not talk about beyond organ shot, ear, etc., of anything living today? In a vacuum, two spheres know the ratio of radius to space, but there's no preposition of positions. No under, up, or pressing, but floating. Diagrams of floating stones and an old, indissoluble attraction. The truth of stick figures, consciousness honed to an edge. And because impossible at this meeting that a single word should pass like magic, one membrane to another, and unlikely, too, that they'll touch, nearness will be the sum of knowing, the juxtaposition all. Ejector seat. I was fast on my way to the fast food joint when the atmosphere sizzled in glory. Road to Damascus, when you catch up to a particle fleeing you, don't assume a change in direction changes how you'll feel, nor when borrowed light and all the darkness go white, blush of capture on a photographic plate, cessation of an action making waves, will stillness necessarily fling you away. Exiting the rocket takes a rocket. I thought God's love a necktie masquerading as a noose. The sound is red, then blue. The persecutor never turns apostle anymore. Discarded rocket stage. This is a short one. It knows its destitution end over end. Loss of direction as down, it goes to sea. Once it bloomed, poppy and cobalt, out of a steel can, to drive and draw a body out of the world. After the day the dancers made, after the easy impossibility of caring for the sick as for oneself, and the muddle of the problem of the skies, after the satellite's sick affair with geosynchrony, after the meteor and the marble eye, a contusion, how great that containing orb, the skull and the story dilating, and stitches too late. After the opening under the skin, and the blackness and the meditative heat, come in, the asters blossoming cried. Thank you.
Sara Eliza Johnson, BA 06, won the National Poetry Series Prize for her first book called Bone Map. She has received NEA fellowships in poetry, a Rona Jaffe Writers Award, 2 fellowships from the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown. Her poems have appeared or are forthcoming in Virginia Quarterly Review, Boston Review, and many other magazines. The world of Sara Johnson's poems is both vividly real and mythic. Her book of poems, called Bone Map, and the poems map both interiors and exteriors, the mysteries of forests, deer, horses, bees, lots of bees, and the bones beneath the skin. Her lines resonate in memory. Quote, loneliness, the lioness licks what's left. There are also poems of dream voyages, visionary phantasmagorias to islands of sleep called archipelagos, and letters from a place called the Ice Field. Johnson has an intimate sense of the Native American past impinging on and haunting the land, the lore, and the present. In a variety of forms, from prose poems to incantations, her work addresses pain and exploration and finds the extraordinary again and again in the local and familiar. Please welcome Sara Johnson.
Thank you, Robert. And thank you so much to the English department for inviting me to come back here. It's pretty amazing and surreal to be back here after so many years. A lot has changed, and I'm really enjoying my visit. I'm going to read a few poems from my book first, and then I'm going to read a few poems from my new manuscript. Deer Rub. Deep in the forest, where no one has gone, where rain bloats the black moss and mud, a deer is rubbing its forelock and antlers against a tree. The velvet that covers the antlers unwinds into strips like bandages. The rain scratches at the deer's coat as if trying to get inside, washes the antlers of blood, like a curator cleaning the bones of a saint in the crypt beneath the church at the end of a century, when the people have begun to think of the bodies as truly dead and unraisable, when children have begun to carry knives in their pockets. Once the last shred of velvet falls to the ground, the deer bends to eat it, nearly finished with ritual and altar, the tree's side stripped of bark, while someplace in the world a bomb strips away someone's skin. The deer's mouth is stained with berries of its own blood. Then the deer is gone, and the tree left opened, the rain darkening red against the hole in the sapwood. The storm grows louder and louder, like a fear. The deer will shed its velvet 4 more times before dying of disease. The tree will grow its bark again. Each atom and each cell will remember the body it had made in this place, this time, long after the rain flushes the river to flood, long after this morning, when the country wakes to another war, when 2 people wake in a house and do not touch each other. This one's called Märchen, and it means fairy tale in German. Lost in the forest one night, we find the body of a wolf, its throat torn open, the wound a cupful of rippling black milk, where maggots curl star-white in their glistening darkness. The eyes hum with flies, which drone a joy in the bones, the brain, wander into the labyrinth through the tongue, still hanging out in half-howl. We keep walking, holding out our hands to feel our way through the dark, as if we could touch as it touches, know it as it knows the stars that float in the vacuum of its voice, that grow brighter and louder until it unsays them, takes them back. I know first there was light to give the void a shape. I know it has no beginning, cannot end. I can hardly see your face out here, but I can hear you breathing. Your voice opens and says, I think the path is this way, floats out, crosses to me in a little cloud boat, and is gone. Keep talking. How did the story go? How dark it was inside the wolf, which had begun as a clump of darkness inside another wolf. Then the child climbed out its belly, shining, without a name, with only a red cap by which to call her and the animal guts in her hands. This is the last poem I'll read from the book. Beekeeping. Yes, there are a lot of bees in this book. It's actually kind of funny because I'm kind of scared of bees, and maybe that's why they always come into my poems. Beekeeping. It begins on the brightest afternoon. My body held in a corona, I can taste the sugar and the heat of. At the edge of the valley, wild hyacinths, violet ones, scythe through the shadows through my eye. When I reach the hive, the bees cluster on my veil like molecules magnified, a code to the core of things. When I lift a comb, one bee stings my wrist, then another. The venom a note, a pulse of light that rises into a song, a tower of spikes, or a swaying stalk of purpling blossoms. This must be what love is, a pain so radiant it cuts through all others. Okay, now I'll read about 4 new poems. This first one is called Combustion. If a human has 206 bones, 30 trillion cells, and each cell has 100 trillion atoms, if the spine has 33 vertebrae, if each atom has a shadow, then the lilacs across the yard are nebulae beginning to star. If the fruit flies that settle on the orange on the table rise like the photons from a bonfire miles away, my thoughts at the moment of explosion are nails suspended in a jar of honey. I peel the orange for you, spread the honey on your toast. When our skin touches, our atoms touch, their shadows merging into a shadow galaxy. And if echoes are shadows of sounds, if each hexagonal cell in the body is a dark pool of jelly, if within each cell drones another cell, the moment the bomb explodes, the man's spine bends like its shadow across the road. The moment he loses his hearing, I think you are calling me from across the house because my ears start to ring. From the kitchen window, I see the lilacs crackling like static, as if erasing, teleporting, thousands of bees rising from the blossoms, tiny flames in the sun. I lick the knife, and the honey pierces my tongue, a nail made of light. It is wrapped in honey. When I step outside, I become fire. Geode. You remember the moon over the city had been eaten by worms. You remember how it had no face, how the windows were iced honeycombs as your mother left the church with a basket of cured meat and eggs and bread, covered with a handkerchief. Your mother walking in her shadow, your mother, her body at night a plot of dirt, and her blue eyes the first flowers the wind permits, and ahead a white horse plodding its carriage past soldiers with machine guns, the scrape of horseshoes on stone, and the wind warp of a train, and the snow swell through an alley, like blood rushing into a brain cavity. Think of all this, how each skull, like a geode, holds a crystal colony inside, a glittering of synapse, quartz glints of dreams you have not had, mirror bits of other faces and cities you know because someone has told you them. Any bullet there could have been hers. Any one could have made a hole in her head. Then crystals would have bled into the air, onto the wind, like the snow wafting into the house through the window you forgot to close, which is why you realize you are shivering. This one is called pyroclast, and that refers to the pyroclastic flow from a volcanic eruption, which moves very fast and is very, very hot. Pyroclast. When my body blew open, the shadow glass cloud galloped through me, glittered my blood to boil. Pain stretched through its own opening, wheezing but alive, slick with my insides. A newborn foal I nursed on my own milk and licked dry after rain, fed parts of me I could survive without. A finger, a tooth, the end of my tongue. But still it tried to climb back inside, reverse itself as a breath, a scream. And still every cell in me was a cupful of poison dividing itself, until at its cry, my skin parted for the animal, and exhausted, I let it come home. A heart can beat outside a body, so can a wound. Nights it climbs out of me to run with its kin, trailing my blood across fields, which yields bruises of larkspur cows eat and die. And though I hide from it, I'm relieved when it returns to sleep in me, when I wake to feel it breathing through my lungs like a pool in a cave that ripples without wind. And this is my last poem, Migration. We shadows return to the trees, scrape the ground like a snake shedding its skin, or a wolf licking a chest cavity, or your teeth against my neck in the dream I can't stop having. I move with the herd now, an alphabet growing under my skin, wind tracing each letter with its tongue, learning its form. Who erased your face, the wind asks. How do you see without eyes? If I could answer, I would say, I see as nectar tunneling through a moon, not through glass, but as pain that learns to love itself, as cloud tissue, as a black glue that holds each thing together, though light would separate it. I see as the tiny ripple that moves through muscle before an earthquake or massacre, the word opening its lesion, the blood of the martyr as it exits the wrist. I see through the hole in my chest that breathes as black holes had breathed against the eyes of the astronomers. When I reach the forest, the trees are soft enough to push a hand through. I find mine among them, and ready to begin the long work of growing away from the sunlight that still laps its memory at the edge of my mind, I break my spine, fold inside, and become one cell of paradise. Thank you.
Sara Scoles, who got an MFA in 2010, graduated from Agnes Scott College in 2007 and was admitted to Cornell in the spring of her senior year, although the Cornell Graduate Admission Committee in fiction is known for rarely admitting students coming directly from an undergraduate program. Her application in fiction, like her subsequent work, was slyly witty and sparkling with offbeat facts, usually derived from her interest in the natural world of this planet or from her study of the cosmos. Like Catherine Chung, she came to Cornell having majored in a STEM subject, in this case, physics. Since leaving Cornell, she's had a successful career as a freelance writer. In addition to publishing a dozen stories in literary journals, She has published dozens and dozens of articles on science and technology in magazines and internet sites such as The Atlantic, Discover, Slate, Popular Science, and Wired. In 2017, she published a biography of the physicist Jill Tarter, who is also a Cornell alumna, though it was not the Cornell connection that drew Sara Scoles to Jill Tarter. Am I mispronouncing it? Is it Tater? Tarter. Oh, it is Tarter, okay. It was Jill, as in potatoes? Why would I think that? It was Jill Tarter's nearly lifelong search for signs of extraterrestrial life. Like her fiction, Sara Scoles' book, Making Contact, Jill Tarter and the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, is full of odd, useful, interesting facts that Sara discovered during her research. She's going to read selections from that book today. Please welcome her back to Cornell.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thanks everybody for having me back. It is true that I like facts, and it is a fact that I am glad to be back here today, and thank you all for coming. Jill Tarter, or Tater, I think she might like the change, is the basis for the main character in the fictional book and the movie Contact. The book is by Carl Sagan, who also has Cornell connections, and the movie stars Jodie Foster. And so Contact is about searching for and then finding aliens. And it came out when I was 12, and I was just really, really obsessed with it. I used to make my parents go to Blockbuster, which used to be a thing, and rent it just over and over again. And so when I decided that I wanted to write a book and that I wanted it to be nonfiction, I kind of thought back to what had first inspired me the most when I was younger. And it was this movie and then the real person that I eventually found out it was inspired by. And before I actually read, since I do love facts, some facts about Jill Tarter, are that her maiden name is Jill Cornell, and she is related to our friend Ezra. And when she decided she wanted to come here for school, she actually applied for a lineage scholarship based on that relationship, but she was rejected because she was a lady, and it was only for male descendants. She was also the only woman in the engineering physics department while she was there, and she had to wear dresses to class. And lastly, when she was invited to a fancy dinner with the organization that finally did give her a scholarship to come here, which was the company Procter & Gamble, they told her that they hoped she didn't expect them to give her a job when she graduated, unless maybe it was in their home perm department, because girls like perms, and she was a girl. So hopefully a lot of things have changed at Cornell. It seems like they have. And ultimately it was here in a class just across the street that she eventually decided that she wanted to go into astronomy in the first place. And so we have the school to thank for Jill Tarter, and who has been the kind of head of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, also called SETI, which is an acronym I'll use in here. So I'm going to read the very first section of the book where she's very hopeful about this search for extraterrestrial intelligence, and then I'm going to read the last section, so spoiler alert, where she's kind of more down on SETI and also on herself. In July 2014, Auditorium 220 at NASA's Ames Research Center fills with employees, a mix of old button-down shirts, pleated dockers, and the designer jeans of postdocs. Pete Warden, the center's director, steps in front of the crowd to introduce the afternoon's speaker. Astronomer Jill Tarter stands to the side of the stadium seats, ready to deliver a talk called Searching for ET, an Investment in Our Long Future. She wears rimless glasses and the big bronze turtle earrings that go everywhere with her, her hands clasped behind her back. As Warden lists Tarter's accomplishments, she shakes her head and smiles, laughing when he says, "Most of us are still trying to find intelligent life here on Earth." When Warden finishes, Tarter takes the stage, and the audience hefts their smartphones to snap pictures of her in front of an introductory PowerPoint slide. "Your story, my story, our story, began billions of years ago," she says. "But that probably doesn't come first to your mind when you wake up in the morning." A pause fills the air-conditioned room. "We need to change that." The screen flashes to an illustration of the Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago, and then Tartar clicks to an image of a pinwheeling galaxy like our Milky Way, born not so long, universally speaking, after the universe itself. We are intimately connected with these faraway times and faraway places, she continues, because it takes a cosmos to make a human. People nod in assent, feeling like they do when a book's narrator articulates a fundamental truth that they themselves have never molded into words. It has taken humans millennia to even begin to figure out how that cosmos made us. We know a bit about how the universe began, how galaxies and stars got their starts, why planets exist, and what ours was like when the first microorganism claimed its spot in that strange ecosystem. But we don't understand how earthly chemistry spat out the first living thing, or whether similar sequences have swept across other planets. We want to know, Tartar says, where do we come from? Where are we going? What is? Why is? And of course, we're really interested in whether or not there's anyone else out there. She shakes the projection system's clicker, which is responding on a delay, like it's communicating with a device light years distant. This thing is a bit jet-lagged, she says, and the audience laughs. Given that we can't even get PowerPoint to work properly, it's clear that our civilization is very young, technologically speaking, and we don't know how long it will survive. We could cause our own demise, climate change, nuclear war, antibiotic-resistant epidemic, or death could come from above, large asteroid on a collision course, nearby supernova, dying sun. But for how young humanity and all earthling life is, Earth resides in an ancient galaxy, and odds are, if we find anyone else inside, they will be much older and smarter than we are. Tartar's face shifts as she becomes frank and colloquial. Look, she says, I don't expect extraterrestrial salvation. I don't expect them to tell us how to solve our problems, but the very existence of such a civilization should motivate us to figure out a way to solve our own problems. Maybe SETI will find such civilizations. Their distant and unimaginable lives will convince us that we too can avoid blistering our planet or blowing each other up. Maybe humans, or whatever we evolve into, could live long enough to build interstellar transit systems or some other sci-fi seeming technology. But maybe SETI will fail. Maybe ET won't phone home. Maybe there is no ET. Tartar, who has spent her whole adult life hoping the cosmic phone will ring, would of course be disappointed. But she claims in this speech and elsewhere that the search will be worthwhile. Actually, she says, really, really, really worthwhile, emphasizing with an up and down gesture of her hand and closing her eyes, even if we don't find aliens. SETI holds up a mirror, she says, showing us how we look from a cosmic perspective, a perspective that began 13.8 billion years ago and encompasses billions and billions of galaxies beyond our own. In that mirror, she says, we are all the same. It has the effect of trivializing the differences among Earthlings, differences we're willing to spill blood over. We have to get over that. I think SETI is a great way to do it. And now for when she feels a little more depressed about where things are going. And if you want to read the book and not have this be a spoiler, then just you can leave. Tartar has worked for more than 4 decades on a project that some believe to be silly and others to be futile, wasteful, or hubristic. And she has not been able to answer the question that she set out to answer. Are we alone? Those words rattle around in her head, and after 40+ years, she's less certain about the answer than she was when she was a kid, looking up at a star and imagining someone catching her eye across the cosmos. That catch, after all, hasn't come. Tartar sometimes expresses disappointment in herself, in the endeavor for this inconclusiveness. In all of science, big discoveries are rare, coming decades or centuries after people start wondering and doing the work. But without those first small steps, no one would make giant leaps at all. To be an astronomer is to be zen about that, about cosmic time, and about how you are a cog in the big machine of science, whose gears begin turning long before you and will continue to turn long after you. Sometimes those gears grind to a result because of your cog, and sometimes your cog is just there to keep the gears going. All astronomers, they're good at being zen in days when they feel hopeless about and powerless before the uncaring bigness and seeming incomprehensibility of the universe. Tartar has had more of the latter recently. Astronomer Natalie Batalla recalls a scientific meeting in 2012. She was sitting next to Tartar, who looked down at the table and near whispered to no one but herself, "We didn't find anything." Batalla was struck by the depth of emotion. That feeling, she says, it was just so tangible, and she announced her retirement 2 weeks later. Clearly, she knew she was on the verge of retiring, and she was expressing that feeling of all those years of work not realizing the goal. But that's how science works. It is what it is. Another astronomer, Margaret Turnbull, had a similar experience at Tartar's retirement party. Tartar's longtime administrative assistant, Chris Neller, said that Tartar feels like a total failure, like everything she did was for nothing. And I just thought, how could she really, says Turnbull, because it never even occurred to me, because of the enormous impact that Jill has had on the world simply by existing and being in the scientific community and pushing the frontiers in every direction. And then Turnbull points out something about Tartar that's not true of most scientists in most fields. She's not replaceable, she says. Many things would not be the way they are if not for the work she did. For decades, Tartar was the keystone in SETI's arch. Without her, it would have collapsed. Sure, someone would have eventually picked up the rubble and rebuilt, but because of Tartar, no one had to. Her perseverance reminds me of one scene in Contact when the main character, Ellie Arroway's nemesis and former advisor, David Drumlin, tells her he's shutting her alien program down. "I know you can't see it now, but I'm doing you a favor," he says. "You're far too promising a scientist to be wasting your gifts on this nonsense." Arroway's nostrils go wide with indignation. "Look, I don't consider what could potentially be the most important discovery of the human race nonsense, okay?" she says. "There's 400 billion stars, and only 2 probabilities," Drumlin interrupts. "One, there is intelligent life out there, but it's so far away you'll never contact it in your lifetime. And 2, there's nothing out there but noble gases and carbon compounds, and you're wasting your time. In the meantime, you won't be published, you won't be taken seriously, and your career will be over before it's begun." "So what?" says Arroway. "It's my life." And so what Tartar's actions have conveyed, it's my life. In Tartar's office hangs a collage depicting a telescope that does SETI work. The artist, Inga Fries, created the collage in her late 90s. After spinal cancer stopped her from standing at an easel, as she had in her youth, she learned to work sitting down, with just fingers and fingernails. For her, it was never too late to learn something new. Tartar met Fries after her husband, an engineer, passed away and donated part of his estate to the SETI Institute. The two became close, their discussions often drifting toward aging and dying, because Fries was probably dying, and because Tartar has always wanted to know what her own future will look like. "How does it feel?" Tartar asked. "You lose a piece of yourself every day," Fries told her. "That's the process." But works of art, like scientific contributions, leave permanent marks on the world's surface, like fossils, big or little, that indicate to Earth's future inhabitants, we were here. Thank you.
Well, the ending is near. This is the last in the series of the creative writing events. I would like to thank Lynn. Are you around? Lynn and Aurora, thank you very much. They've been just incredible in organizing all of this, always. I would also, back in 2011, when this Freund endowment was maturing, I have to say that the prize, the Creative Writing Prize for Alumni, was the brainchild of J. Robert Lennon and Marianne Marsh and Roger Gilbert. So I'd like to thank them too. Thank you so much. And as director, this is such a pleasure for me to announce the prizes. Catherine Chung, please come up. Ezra Feldman, please come up. Oh, wait, stay up here so we can all clap. Sara Johnson, please come up. And Sara Scoles. Woo! Thank you. Thank you.
very much. Now remember, the books are on sale, reception upstairs. Let's go for it. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. This is amazing.
Yes, the check is in the mail.
That's great.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.